Abraham Lincoln here is one of the most racist presidents we've had in modern history. He pours fuel on every single racist fire. Every single one. Started off his campaign coming down the escalator saying he's going to get rid of those Mexican rapists. He's banned Muslims because they're Muslims.
Joe Biden last night responding after the president dodged a question about whether or not he is fueling racial tension, and also why he retweeted a video of a man shouting white power. Trump responded like he always does, saying he's done more for black people than anyone since Abraham Lincoln, and he is the least racist person in the room. But the racists and white supremacists sure do like him. Former Klan leader David Duke, huge supporter, and the Proud Boys. They're emboldened after the president gave them a shout out at the first debate.
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
white
like me to condemn. White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
Since then, they've been selling shirts saying stand back and stand by. Plus, the State Department recently released a report showing just how much white supremacy has been rising since 2015. And it's one of the biggest domestic terror threats we as a nation face. FBI director, who Trump appointed, I should note, he agrees.
A majority of the domestic terrorism cases that we've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence.
And we just recently saw just how dangerous this movement can be. That's when the FBI broke up a militia plot and arrested more than a dozen men who they say were not only plotting to kidnap, but probably execute the Michigan governor and even foment a civil war. The governor, she's placing some of the blame directly at the feet of the president.
I do believe that there are still serious threats that groups like this group, these domestic terrorists, are finding comfort and support in the rhetoric coming out of Republican leadership from the White House to our state house.
I want to bring in my next guest to discuss. She infiltrated hate groups and she wrote a book about it, and it's called Culture Warlords, My Journey into the Dark Web of White Supremacy. I want to welcome to the program Talia Lavin. And first of all, this was fascinating, disturbing as all hell, but fascinating. My question is, why would you do that to yourself over a year, putting yourself through this? I guess Charlottesville was your tipping point, but did you know just how ugly a world this was before you got into it?
Well, unfortunately, Richard, I'd already been a target of the online far right for some time as an outspoken Jewish woman and as someone who had written about the white nationalist movement. So I was already facing pretty regular anti-Semitic harassment, absolutely brutal misogyny. And so my reaction when I found the abyss looking into me was to decide to peer back and drag it out into the light. Double down. I'm a stubborn lady.
One of the things that was pretty troubling was I went into it, and I think a lot of people do, and we have this neat categorization of who we think these folks are. Lonely losers. We saw who was in this Michigan Wolverine outfit. Guys who have not done well in life and they're taking out white grievances on whoever it is, whether it's Jews, whether it's the misogyny, whether it's blacks, name the group. But you said it can run the gamut here, and at our detriment, we put them into these neat little boxes when it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons I'd like people to take away from the book is that people who join the white power movement aren't uniquely disenfranchised, uniquely socioeconomically disadvantaged. They can be at any educational attainment level. And I really observed this through kind of infiltrating these chats, reading these hate sites regularly. The people I spoke to were, creating audiobooks for one another. They were reading 19th century phrenology and eugenics texts. And there were people with jobs, people with wives, software engineers, assistant professors. There are really folks from all walks of life who are attracted to this movement because its principles draw on, universal human tendencies, disaffection, loneliness, dissatisfaction with your station in life.
Did you see, and you created these characters, if you will, Tommy O'Hara, I think you set up, he's a 21-year-old virgin with bad skin, and Did you see over the course of a year plus that people were looking for some community, any community, and then they got turned into being anti-Semites and misogynists? Or did they go there because that's who they were and they were looking for other people like them?
So the process of radicalization, as I see it and as I describe it in the book, often starts with propaganda on YouTube, on other mainstream social media sites. Very few people start out waving swastikas. They're sort of drawn there through very slickly produced and sort of internally networked propaganda. These propaganda producers, I call them launderers of extremist ideas, really interact with one another and sort of help people down into these sticky, tarry places. And the places I infiltrated were more for people who had already been radicalized. But when they described their journeys, for example, on their profiles on the white supremacist dating site I infiltrated for a year, they often described YouTube as a starting point.
And I learned this term trad wives, I guess traditional. They look at women as vessels to impregnate to keep the white pure Aryan race going right now. I mean, it's some really dark stuff that I got from this in terms of what they look at a role of a woman for. It's not just they got a problem with feminism, they have a problem seemingly with women in general.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think misogyny is often sort of cast aside or rendered kind of less important than it is as a driving force for this movement, both in terms of recruitment and in terms of its principles. So one of the big white supremacist slogans is called the 14 words. We must secure a future for the white race and for our white children. And that was coined by a white supremacist terrorist who was in jail for bank robbery and for shooting a Jewish radio host, David Lane, in 1991. 14 and 1488. 88 stands for Heil Hitler. H is the eighth letter of the alphabet. It's a really common Nazi code you'll see all across the internet. But those 14 words, this idea of propagating the white race, really kind of stands at the center of all of it, where a woman is a womb is a woman, and sort of chaste, submissive, ossified gender roles really stand at the center of this movement.
Anybody who watched last night's debate or the first one, and I'm certainly not the first one to coin the phrase white grievance, but the whining that all the problems are the fault of the immigrants, all the problems are the faults of the minorities here, how angry the president is at the temerity if a woman asks him a hard question or a politician dares to stand up to him. I know this didn't start in 2016. But did you find in the year that you were doing the reporting on this that these communities really think Trump gets them and he's one of them?
So I think that feeling was very universal in 2015 and 2016. It's not just that Trump spouted openly white nationalist and racist rhetoric during his campaign. One striking moment that, is not often remembered is when two Trump supporters in Boston beat up, broke the ribs of, and urinated on a Latino homeless man. Trump was asked to condemn them, and he called them passionate about our country. In 2016, they really viewed him as their guy. They were creating, legions of memes for him. They saw themselves as kind of the foot soldiers of Trump. And when he got elected, one of the biggest neo-Nazi sites on the internet just had this headline, "We won, he's our guy." So since then, there's been a bit of a disillusionment with Trump, but, they're still excited whenever he gives them a shout out. And they still view it as both a sense of being given permission to engage in their activities and also as a strong means of recruitment.
Last thing, I've spoken to national security folks who take pains to say, let's not inflame this threat from more than what it is. The numbers are not, legion. And others are saying, you minimize this at your own peril here. These are obviously motivated folks who are looking for a reason, to put their backward agenda in play. Where do you fall on it? Are these folks they're the gang that can't shoot straight, or are they a much bigger threat than people want to admit, and there's a sense of urgency and an urgency now that we have to deal with them?
Well, given the topic of my book, you won't be surprised to learn that I think the white power movement is a very urgent and dangerous thing that all of us need to take it upon ourselves to address in our communities. You know, illustrating that, I would just say this is a gang that unfortunately can sometimes shoot straight. And we've seen that in some horrific mass casualty events, you know, whether it's the Walmart shooting in El Paso, the tragic shooting at the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue, or even looking back further to the mass shooting at a Black church in Charleston by Dylan Ruth. You know, it only takes one person motivated by stochastic terror, motivated by this perpetual motion machine of online violence and, you know, desire for civilizational collapse to cause tremendous pain and fear.
The book, again, is Culture, Warlords. Talia Lavin, fascinating and very frightening reporting here. It was an eye-opener. I appreciate it, though. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, when we come back, New York Congressman, he'll join us to discuss whether or not we're going to see a stimulus deal here to help millions and millions of Americans who are just having trouble making ends meet. Plus, he represents Northern Manhattan, which was hit particularly hard, as you know, with the COVID outbreak this spring. How worried is he that the same thing's going to happen this fall and winter?